Martin sat at his desk, wrapping up the last of his paperwork for the weekend. Working with his brother, Patrick, at their architectural firm was like a second home, where they combined their talents and efforts to create magnificent buildings. Martin, Patrick's voice called out from the next office. Alexander called. He invited us to his lake house this weekend. What do you think we could take a little break? Martin felt a surge of energy instantly. Of course, Patrick, he replied, getting up from his desk. That sounds like a great idea. We both need a break. An hour later, they were on their way. Alexander was Patrick's best friend. They lived next door as children and went to the same class together. Martin was that annoying little brother who always tagged along. Alexander always reminded him of this when they met. The road led through picturesque hills and meadows, where the green fields gradually turned into warm shades of gold. Finally, they arrived at the country house by the lake. Lush gardens surrounded the house, where colorful flowers bloomed. Alexander greeted them with a wide smile, hugging each of the brothers. "Welcome, my friends," he exclaimed, beaming with joy. "Lena and I have been waiting for you." He offered them a tour of the house and then suggested they have a beer on the terrace, where they could enjoy the view of the lake. "This is simply gorgeous, Alex," Martin marveled, gazing at the blue waters of the lake. "You've created a real paradise here." Alexander smiled, proudly looking at his little kingdom. But the real surprise for the brothers was the appearance of Hannah, Alexander, and Lena's daughter. They looked at the girl in surprise, who had long since ceased to be the teenager they remembered. Hannah had grown into a beautiful young woman and had come to her parents for the summer holidays. A few days went by. They had barbecues outdoors, went fishing, and spent evenings playing board games and having lively conversations. But for Hannah, it all started to seem boring and monotonous. She preferred solitude and often talked to her friends on the phone in her room. Martin increasingly found himself looking at the girl, his heart skipping a beat at her beauty. Her charm was genuine, and he felt he couldn't look away. He felt guilty before Alexander, as he was not only his brother's friend, but also his. Watching her swim in the lake, he couldn't help but think of the thoughts that were running through his mind. Her body was like a work of art, making his heart race. And every time she turned to him with a smile or sat next to him at dinner, he could feel his pulse quicken, his excitement twisting knots in his stomach. But Hannah seemed to notice his glances and didn't mind them. She enjoyed teasing him. And she might accidentally touch his knee under the table, or reach for something across him, pressing her whole body against him very close. One day, Hannah's father asked her to go to the store to pick up some groceries. "Don't mind if I tag along?" she asked Martin, smiling. Martin felt his heart skip a beat. He glanced around subtly, trying to hide his excitement. "Sure, no problem," he replied, trying to keep his voice calm. However, Alexander intervened, raising his eyebrows in surprise. "Hannah, why bother another person? You can handle this yourself." Hannah chuckled. "What if I just want some company?" Martin felt his cheeks flush slightly. "No problem, I'd be happy to take you." They drove into town, Hannah enjoying the music in the car and teasing Martin, who happily took the brunt of her jokes. Suddenly, her hand rested on his knee. "What are you doing?" he asked, embarrassed. "It's just a joke." "What a nerd you are," she replied, laughing. Martin felt his patience wearing thin. He couldn't hold back any longer. Pulling the car over at the nearest stop, he suddenly pinned her to the seat and began kissing her passionately. Hannah responded to his kisses, not resisting. She whispered in his ear, suggesting they go to the nearest hotel. Martin immediately agreed and drove in the desired direction. At the hotel, they were met with a passion that flared up with renewed vigor. In the evening, they returned with groceries. Her father, noticing that Hannah and Martin had returned with a long delay, asked why they had been there for so long. Hannah, remaining calm, replied that the car had broken down. Martin felt awkward around his brother and Alexander. Eventually, he decided to share what had happened with Patrick. The brother, upon hearing the story, scolded him for his irresponsibility, claiming that it was disrespectful to Alexander, since he had invited them to his place. But Martin was in a different mood. He believed that there was nothing wrong with him and Hannah having a relationship. Martin could see that his feelings for Hannah were growing. His eyes lit up at the sight of her, and he tried to please her in everything. But Hannah seemed indifferent, as if she didn't even remember what had happened at the hotel. This tormented him, and he decided to talk to her about it. "What do you think about that incident at the hotel?" he asked her as soon as they were alone. "Well, we had fun. I liked you and I thought why not? Nothing serious," she said calmly. Martin was shocked by this response, but he decided that it was just another one of Hannah's games, her childish way of teasing him, or maybe she was just playing hard to get and trying to hide her feelings from him. He decided to ignore her and show her that he didn't care. But Hannah didn't react to this at all. Instead, she started hanging out with other guys from the neighborhood, which made Martin jealous. Eventually, he couldn't take it anymore and started courting her again with even more enthusiasm, trying to get her attention. Martin couldn't help but touch Hannah, kissing her when no one was looking. Hannah responded to him, and a few times they had sex right in the house when everyone was asleep. Martin would resolutely come to her room to express his feelings. One day, their mother caught them kissing in the kitchen, and then everyone found out. Alexander was furious to learn that Martin, the brother of his best friend, had involved his daughter in an intimate relationship. He almost directly asked him to leave the house. Alexander had never argued with Patrick so much. He could not forgive him for knowing everything and not telling him. The brothers got into the car and drove away so as not to aggravate the situation further. But Martin was not going to give up. He went to Alexander's house. "Listen, I know you're mad, Alex. But I want you to listen to me," he began. "I love Hannah and I want to be with her. What's wrong with that?" "Nothing," Alexander replied, "but why hide in corners? Why didn't you tell me?" "She was afraid. She asked me not to tell you. I'm sorry it was disrespectful since I was your guest. But I promise I will prove that I didn't use her." Alexander smiled at him and patted him on the shoulder. From that moment on, Martin and Hannah started dating officially. At first everything seemed perfect. Martin was happy like never before. He made Hannah happy, buying her everything she wanted, fulfilling every whim. He paid attention to her, trying to make her happy, because her smile was the most precious treasure for him. Hannah became more and more demanding and capricious. Her whims became more and more unrealizable. And if her boyfriend did not fulfill everything to the last detail, she threw a tantrum and threatened to leave him. But Martin ignored all the signs, confident that only continued love and care would help fix the situation. Patrick watched the changes in Martin with concern. He felt that something was wrong. "Martin, I'm worried about you," Patrick said, looking his brother in the eyes. "This girl, she doesn't seem to respect you. She's using your love." "Patrick, you're exaggerating," Martin replied. "We have little misunderstandings, that's all. Everything will work out in time, you'll see." Martin was increasingly plunged into the chaos of his relationship with Hannah. He was like an emotional roller coaster, never knowing what to expect from his lover. One day she could be angry and indifferent to him, and the next she could be affectionate and confess her eternal love. This constant uncertainty began to undermine Martin's nerves. He became tense, drained, and insecure, constantly trying to guess Hannah's moods and desires. He would come to work, but couldn't concentrate. his thoughts preoccupied only with what was happening in his personal life. Martin realized that it was impossible for him to open up to Hannah about his problems. She didn't want to listen to him, didn't show interest in his work or personal hobbies. Every time he tried to discuss his concerns, Hannah would belittle his words, pretending that his problems didn't matter. When Martin raised his voice slightly out of nervousness, Hannah would immediately turn the situation around. She accused him of being crazy, of yelling at her. Gradually, Hannah felt more and more power over Martin and reveled in it. She used his love and devotion to control his every action and word. Martin gradually lost his personal space, becoming completely dependent. Under Hannah's influence, he even stopped communicating with his brother. She didn't like that Patrick supported Martin and pushed him to break up with her. Their relationship lasted for a year and a half, but for Martin this time became a real nightmare. He no longer remembered how to simply live one day without worry and helplessness. Hannah became his shadow, looming over him at any moment, and he feared her reactions, her words, her orders. The girl continued to convince him that he was nothing without her, that he was a complete worthless person, incapable of living and acting independently, and he believed it. One day during another argument, Martin suddenly lost his temper, his emotions boiling over. He could no longer tolerate Hannah's constant humiliation and behavior. Like a shockwave, fury engulfed him, and he hit her. Hannah stood there, stunned and insulted. Her eyes were full of surprise and fear at this sudden aggression. "How dare you?" she whispered, trying to understand what had just happened. Martin looked at her, his eyes filled with tears. He felt that his actions were unforgivable, but it was too late. "Why do you treat me like this?" he asked, his voice trembling with emotion. "I truly loved you. I only wanted to make you happy." Martin's words sounded like a plea for forgiveness and understanding. He continued, "I lost myself because of you. I forgot who I was. I had my own company, friends, a brother. I was a good person. But you never saw that." Hannah looked at him silently, her face expressing mixed feelings, confusion, fear. Then she burst into tears and hugged him, begging him to stay. Her words of love pierced him to the core, but he knew it couldn't go on. "Hannah, I can't do this anymore," he whispered, struggling to raise his eyes to meet her gaze. "You need to get help. Your behavior is not normal. I'm afraid for you and for myself." Hannah kept pleading with him, threatening suicide if he left, and swearing that she loved him. But Martin was resolute. "I'm sorry, Hannah," he said, feeling tears welling up in his eyes too. "But the love that was in me is dead. You killed it. I'll try to help you, but only as a friend." With those words, Martin turned and walked away, leaving Hannah in tears. He knew it would be a long and difficult road, but he also knew it was the only way to free himself from the shadow of the past and start a new life that would belong only to him.